Thank you very much, Emmanuel, for the introduction. Thank you very much to the Maison Française for giving me the opportunity to talk about this book and about my work here. So I'm really happy to be here at Columbia because actually when I was doing my field work on Puerto Rican movement, I was of course in New York and I was affiliated to Columbia University, so it was nice to be back more than a decade after that. And well, yes, I published 2 books the same year, but it's kind of a trompeur, as we say in France, because it took me a very long time to transform my dissertation into a book, almost 10 years. And it was painful and difficult, but I did it. And almost at the same time, I had this other book that was written a bit more rapidly, but it was also painful. Actually, writing was painful. And for some reason, they were published like 2 months apart, but they were actually from 2 very different writing processes, and it's more, well. So yes, I'm going to talk about this very funny little book, which is not really an academic book. It's something that I wrote for a number of reasons. So, because it's not necessarily very easy to talk about a book that people haven't necessarily read, and I don't really want to tell you everything that's in the book, but I'm going to focus on the reasons why I wrote it and the process I went through in order to write it, and talk about its organization. It's important to say that I'm a political scientist by training, but I mainly teach American studies and US history in the Anglo-American department at the University of Lille. It's important because it led me to teach US history, sociology of race and migration to students who did not really have a background in social science. Some of them have been doing mainly literature, some of them are doing linguistics, some of them are studying history. But very often my class is the first course they have in social science. So, and that was a big part of it because it meant that in order to address issues around race, either in the US or in comparative perspective, I had to kind of adapt what I had been doing before that when I was teaching, when I was a PhD student. And I realized that literature was pretty powerful to teach a number of questions, especially around race, especially for people who haven't been studying race from a sociological perspective, from a social science perspective. So that was one very big element. The second one is that if you're interested in the Caribbean, in the French academic world, actually English departments are not bad. Because that's where you find people who've been, who know about Caribbean authors, who've been reading them, who can be interested in a number of topics that I was really interested in. So even though there are a number of issues when you have like methodological questions with colleagues in literature, still there are a number of topics, of areas that they just get, that they are interested in, and that was also a very important part in the reasons why I wrote the book. Another issue is because I have this sort of academic, because I'm both working on the French overseas territories and on race in a comparative perspective, I have the opportunity to present in a number of arenas that are very different. Sometimes I'm asked to present on Martinique and Guadeloupe and public policies there, and other times I am asked to talk about race in the US or race in a comparative perspective, because it's really difficult to talk about race just in France, so it's better to do it. You use a proxy and you use the US and you explain how it's different or similar to the French, to the US case. And having the opportunity to talk about all of these topics made me realize how difficult it was to convey a number of things that we want to show in our research. One of my favorite answers to a number of questions is, it's a bit more complex than that, which is not very satisfying when people ask, an interview for just 5 minutes. So I was like, okay, how can you explain this? It's a little bit more complex than that in a book or in something that's going to be read by more people than those who read your academic articles or your books. So that's really something that I've been struggling with. How do you get out the, mere academic world? How do you go out there to talk about your research? How do you talk about race without abandoning this? It's a little bit more complex than that, especially in the current French context. So those are really things that I was thinking about when I had this book in mind. I had an idea in mind, but it wasn't really a book. But I thought that I needed to do something if I wanted to keep talking about research, about race in a different way. Then I was asked by a publishing house, I don't know, Maison d'édition is publishing. I was asked to, I was contacted by Textuel, who wanted to have a new publication, and what they asked was, oh, we would like a sort of French version of Ta-Nehisi Codes Between the World and Me. I was like, wow. I really liked the book because I thought it was beautifully written. I thought it was very honest intellectually, even though I did not necessarily agree with everything in the book. I liked it a lot. I liked the fact that he would, talk about, this. I think it's a wonderful question, who is the Tolstoy of the Zulus? And I think that his answer is also very interesting. I like the fact that it's a very materialist way to talk about race, and I think it's very beautifully written, and I was like, okay, that's really great, but I can't write Between the World and Me, a French version of Between the World and Me, because even though I do comparison between France and the United States, and I think that there are much more similarities than one would think, I also think that you can't just, do a sort of American version of that one book. And if you want to actually address the same array of questions in the French context, you have to address the colonial question, the colonial history. And so I was like, okay, well, I need to suggest this. I need to tell them, okay, I don't want to do that, but I have another project. Would you mind me doing this other project? And in order to suggest this to this publishing companies that didn't have any expertise on race whatsoever. So it's both interesting but also more difficult because you don't really know what you're going to talk about with people in the publishing house who don't really publish stuff on race. So what I did is that I used part of my other book, La Fabrique des Identités, and that's how I'm going to tell you a little story about my other book. So La Fabrique des Identités is the book from my dissertation that was looking at social movements and the issues of identities in social movements by Afro-Caribbean persons from Martinique and Guadeloupe in mainland France and Puerto Ricans in the US. And I was looking at the way the state, the government would look at these movements. I would look at the way movements would frame their issues in these two different contexts, and I would look at the reasons why individuals would get into these movements and stay involved in these movements, despite the fact that they could be stigmatized, etc., etc. When I wrote the dissertation, I was told that it was impossible to see me in the book. I was told, oh, you try to, you hide yourself. We don't know what you think about these movements. There's a very big distance between you and your fieldwork, and I said, well, yes, because I'm in the French academic world, and one thing that I do is not to, because I know that it's very difficult to be legitimate on these kind of issues, because I was told at the beginning of my doctoral process that my topic was very exotic. Of course, I would try and give all of the sign of professional, research and not talk about me. So of course, no, you don't see me, you don't know what I think about it, and I tried to put this distance, and it was on purpose. And I don't see why I would have to, just show everything, just me. So but it's still something that I had in mind. Because there was also, I could feel and I could tell that there was a lot of bienveillance in the way the people who told me that. So I had this in my mind, and when I wrote the book, I was like, okay, you need to be freed from a number of things. So I decided to include photographs so there's a livre photographique in the book, and I wrote an épilogue réflexif, which is a sort of conclusion in which I write, which became basically the proposal for Infamie Française, in which I explain that it's sometimes that in my book it's very difficult to see all of the intimate reasons why race matters, or is a difficult issue, or is also a very complex issue. That I talk about institutions, organizations, about framing of public movements, about reasons why people get involved, but that a number of all of the hidden things that are produced by race and that produce race are missing from that book, and that I would like to address this in the future. And so I wrote this text that is more literary, and I have to say that maybe I don't know how to say that in English, littéraire contrarié. So that's why I had this sort of épilogue réflexif, and I did that, and I gave it to Textuel for Infamie Française. And they said yes. So then I had to write the book. And that was hard. Another thing that was more personal was that when they accepted the project I submitted, I lost two grandparents. And so because I lost two grandparents and I had at the time one child, the issue of transmission got very important. And especially because I moved from Martinique 20 years ago, at the time 18 years before, and because I feel very strongly that I have a Martinican identity. I feel, if you ask me what I am Martinican, and it's something very core, very important. But I was also realizing that that might not be the same, that would probably not be the same for my daughter, because she was born in Paris, she lives in Montmartre, and so that was the first reason why she would not feel the way I felt, that she would not care for the same songs, and she wouldn't be moved by the same things. The other thing is because it was that her father also felt very strongly about his identity as a person from the south of France, of Spanish origin, with trajectories that go through Algeria. And that's this moment when you realize that your child is not just your own, that it's actually part of a whole group called the family, and that a lot of people put a lot of things on the child. So I would put a number of Martinican features and identity issues and questions, etc. But a lot of other people would do the same, and were not less legitimate. Well, that's a actual discussion, but so that was also part of the issue. And another more external reason why I had to write the book, and I had to write it the way I wrote it, was that the public sphere in France is and has been saturated by racist comments, by racism, by people talking to you about the grand remplacement, telling you about a number of things that make a lot of people who look like me and look like my daughters and my nephew and nieces external elements from France. And I have to say that from a very personal perspective, I feel very Martinican, and so I always have in the back of my mind, oh, if it turns bad, I just go to Martinique. But that's me, because I grew up there, and I realized that for a number of people who look like me, like my daughters, nephew and nieces, etc., it's not the same, because they like Martinique, that's not where they grew up. They live in France, that's their country. So I had this sort of sense of urgency that I had to write a book that would tell them, that would assert that they don't have to excuse themselves, they don't have to be sorry and to be about the fact that they live in France. They live in France for a number of, family and historical reasons, And and I needed to tell them, not so much prove to other people that, oh, you know, they've been like people in France for a long time, and it's not a white country. I needed to say that, but I needed to tell them, and tell people who look like them, that they belong to this country. They don't have to justify their presence, and that when they face a number of very difficult, racist moments, and that people tell them that, oh, maybe they're too sensitive, etc. No, that they're not too sensitive, and that they're not crazy. And so it's really a book telling people, no, you're not crazy, and you have all of the rights to be where you are. And here are a number of examples. And I'm going to take the example of one family, and we could discuss about the definition I give to the notion of family in this book. And I basically decided to take 4 generations of people who are all, so it starts with my daughters and their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and I explain how colonization, migration, exile, race have been part of their trajectories for almost 1 century. It actually started during the 30s. There are some elements that are before, but I wanted to show what all of these elements, how all of these elements belong to the trajectory of what I call an ordinary French family. Because that's, you know, if you ask me what is a French family, that's what I know is that. What I know is exile, migration, race, racialization, racism, and a number of other things. And I really wanted to talk about some very common experiences shared by people who are all ancestors or in the family, in my daughter's family, but who sometimes are white, others are black, and also some very specific experience encountered by the people who are not white in their family. And I thought it was totally at a time when, you know, you have like all of these discourses on France is a French country, about communautarism, etc. It's very well, there are a number of common experiences, and these common experiences, and I'm going to talk about 2 of them that are very important to me. These common experiences, these sort of common things, are not necessarily liberté, égalité, fraternité, because not everyone in the French family feel that these principles actually apply to them, or feel that they apply to them, but still there are some things that they have in common, and I'm going to talk about that, are very practical elements. But there are also some very big differences. If we take the 2 grandmothers, my mother and my partner's mother, they are both from, you know, pretty poor families. They grew up in the north and the south of France, from like very poor background. They were the eldest in their families, and a number of things in their experiences are very similar. But my mom did encounter very violent racism at a very early age, and that makes a difference. And it doesn't take anything away from what she has in common with this other little girl from the south of France who also suffered because she was growing up poor and she was ashamed because she was poor, and who felt that she had to succeed at school. It doesn't take anything away from this common experience, but there is something specific about being a 7-year-old and being called négresse à cadeau during recess in primary school. And saying this, explaining this, to me was key to was kind of central to the project. The book starts with one of the very important common experiences to me. But before talking about that, I'm going to talk about how I collected the stories. I think we are very lucky because my older daughter, she had the opportunity to meet 7 out of 8 great-grandparents. So that's one first, that's lucky. And she still has 4 on her dad's side, and only one on the other side. But there were these presences, people who were there. So it was possible to talk to a number of them. It was also possible to gather, to collect a number of histories from other members of the family. So at the time I told you that I lost two grandparents in 2016, but there were the occasions to gather the family, to ask questions, and to kind of compare my memories of the family stories and what people would say afterwards, and sometimes it's not necessarily the same, and it's kind of difficult to know the tension, let's call it a tension, between what people tell you about their history, what you remember of these stories. Another thing that was kind of difficult to deal with was one of the person I interviewed for the project. I've known him for 17 years, and during 17 years I've heard like lots of stories about his anger against his parents for not really letting him do this and that, and other things occurring one day, etc. And the day we sat for the interview, he started by, I had a very happy childhood. I love my parents and everything is fine. Okay. And you have lots of moments like that. Another kind of difficult moment was that I grew up with my mother. My mother is what we call mixed. So my mom was from the north of France and dad was from Guadeloupe. And she was born in Dunkirk in the north of France. And she grew up there. So my grandmother from Dunkirk was a little kid, a little child during World War II. And you know that Dunkirk was heavily bombed during the war. And so I grew up hearing that my grandmother had been moved along with other kids from Dunkirk to Denmark. And I grew up with that story. You know, she was in Denmark, and very often when I was little, I was like, oh, and what would have happened if she hadn't come back? Would have vanished? And you know, I would think about stuff like that. But then, when I started writing the story, I was like, Denmark, that really makes sense. Denmark was occupied during the war, and I tried to find sources that would kind of confirm the thing that's a very important family story. And I had nothing to confirm it. I went to talk to historians who are specialists of the north of France, of World War II, and they were like, don't care, Denmark, no, that's not possible. So I wrote the first version, trying to write in sort of literary way that, well, maybe it's something that my grandmother had kind of invented to tell her daughter that she also had the experience of being singled out, etc. And so when I asked my mom to read the first version of the manuscript, she got very mad and upset. And she said, you're telling me your grandmother is a liar. She went to Denmark, I'm telling you. So I had to find a way, with the writing process, to talk about, you know, the fact that, well, we don't really know, without saying that it wasn't true, because I couldn't. And so that was another moment of the tension between individual memories and like this process of collecting stories. And so, once I collected a number of stories, I started with the first very common experience. An experience common to all of the great-grandparents, which is being a child during wartime. All of them were children during a war. It was either the Civil War in Spain, or World War II in the north of France, World War II in the south of France, World War II in Martinique and Guadeloupe. So you didn't have bombs, but people were hungry. There was a blockade on Martinique and Guadeloupe. And so this experience is a very important one. And starting with this, saying, okay, you have all of these people living in very different places. Of course, I don't know that they are all the ancestors of my daughter, but they had this thing in common. They were children during the war. They were scared, they were hungry, they were sometimes separated from their parents. That's a big common experience. So the book starts with the war, being a child during war. Another common experience that I found very important and telling is this moment when several members of the family, his family, in different places during the 60s, get public housing. Before that, you have like this 15 years of very difficult housing. After the war, it's just difficult, and people live in very difficult conditions. They live in very small places. You have to have lots of people in the house. Having your own bedroom is just unthinkable. And all of a sudden, you have access to an HLM, to a public project, to public housing, and you have like running water, you have a regular bathroom, and you have a bedroom. And in a lot of interviews, this moment is really important. At some point, people, for the girls in the story, it's a moment when you can get some privacy, even if it's temporary, even if it's just part of the day. For others, it's like being able to kind of breathe and have like this possibility to just live in better conditions. And I think that's a very core moment, and something that should be, that I wanted to put forward as a very common experience for a lot of French people from very different backgrounds. But then I try also to explain what it's like to be living in a place like Martinique or Guadeloupe during the 60s, to be in a place that's supposed to be a French department fully assimilated, and that's actually still under a very strong colonial power that has a violent repression of anti-colonial moments, and what it means to have as only kind of silver lining the fact that you have to move away, the fact that you have to go 8,000 kilometers from your home if you want to succeed. And even if that home is called La Mère Patrie, even if it's called the motherland, it's still 8,000 kilometers away. And when you live there, you realize that most people don't really think that you're a citizen just like them. And that's also a very specific experience that not all French people encounter. And, well, that's really the kind of the book is organized chronologically, and by going to the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, I try to show both very common experiences and things that are specific to certain French people. I also sometimes try to, because I'm a littéraire contrarié, there's also sort of format in the writing. Sometimes there are things that are not totally analytical, that are not absolutely based on history or social science, and it's more the imagination and like emotions and the way people experienced some moments where I try to write these elements as well, because I was very moved by an interview I listened to from Toni Morrison, who was talking about the fact that her literature was not sociology, and that she was sort of making a difference between data and knowledge. And I thought that this difference was really interesting, that of course she used data, and she used historical work, and she used sociological work to write books, but what she wanted to convey was not just the actual historical or sociological facts, it was what it felt like. And this what it felt like was kind of, I'm not trying to compare myself to Morrison, of course, but I really like this sort of goal given to something that you write, that you just, it's not just about telling you about some aspects of the French Caribbean history or of the the migration of this kind of part of the population to mainland France and exile, etc. I don't want to write anything that you can find in history books, or even though some of the elements aren't really found in history books either, that's not but I really wanted to deal with this emotional dimension, what it feels like to experience racism when you're a very little kid, and that's actually maybe the most important experience show how being racialized at a very early age, discovering that you're this or that, being racialized, being considered as a radical other, is something that actually follows you for the rest of your life. And I realized because I think I was lucky to grow up in Martinique, I realized pretty late that I grew up in a place that had share of racial issues, but I was not a minority where I grew up. That I was not in a minority situation, and that it changed a lot of things. And so a number of ideas that I had on a number of ongoing debates in the French context were also informed by the fact that I had a sort of French Caribbean privilege compared to a number of other persons. And acknowledging this, acknowledging that when this guy tries to sell me a calendar with all of the accomplishments of black people in history, and I tell him, I don't need to be convinced that black people are great or that they accomplished some stuff, and even though they haven't accomplished anything, it's not something that matters to me, and understanding where this came from, and that I was able to say that because I didn't need that, because most of my teachers look like me, because people in power in Martinique look like me, and all of that things was important, and it took me years to realize that. But I also think that it's important not only to acknowledge it, but to explain that a discomfort that I can have with a certain form of politicization of race in France by younger generations today is normal, because we are talking about a wide array of experiences. We're talking about black people in France, or people who are racisés in the French context. So it's basically all of the elements I wanted to put in this book, which can be read pretty easily. It's a short book, in which I put a lot of things, a lot of characters, and those are not really characters. And I'm not sure I can tell much more without telling you the whole, all of the anecdotes and stories in this book. But well, thank you for listening. And I think that Emmanuel has some comments, questions. Yes.
Thank you for this presentation. Thank you for this great book. So normally when we have a book panel here, there is someone to read the book and make comments and like very academic manner. But because the book is not an academic history of French families between Fort-de-France and Dunkirk, and Toulon, but really a personal history in a way enmeshed with the larger history. I find it difficult to come up with like comments, and I had questions, great questions for you. And maybe in the question you're going to give us a few more anecdotes, right? So I suppose my first question was about not so much why you wrote the book, because actually it was my first question, but you answered the question. But maybe to push you a little more about this project of doing a history of the family. So you said it was personal, you lost your grandparents almost at the same time as your both daughters were born, almost the same years. And also it was, obviously the project was making sense of this larger kind of movement in France, as you said, the rise of expressions of racism, of the more violent expressions of racism that maybe were not, were maybe more private, right? There was not that there was real racism in France, but the politicization in a way of racism in the past 10 or 15 years. So I suppose you speak at several moments in your book about transmission. There is the idea that this history needs to be transmitted to your children, right? So it's not, it's a genealogy, right? So it's really the book is about, in a way, the two daughters, the two parents, the four grandparents of, the four grandparents of the two daughters, and then the eight, I'm sorry, I kind of lost track. So it's 2, 4, 8, and 16, right? So tons of people. So I think like the total additions of the people who appear in the book in and out of focus, right? But there are tons of people. And it felt almost like, to me, reading this, it felt almost like a now, right? That, or the kind of book that people would write in the 17th or 18th century, in their Bible, the first page of their Bible, they would write all the important events in their families, right? So to remember. It feels almost like there are so many people, there are so many places, so you have, obviously you have Martin and obviously, and also Oran, and Alicante, and Corsica, and Toulon, and Dunkirk, and all these people move around over those 70 years, right? That it feels like if you don't write down what has happened to these people, it's going to get lost forever. So there was this idea of like writing this and now to keep a memory for you and for your daughters.
No, it's true. I realized something. I realized that I'm the oldest of my cousins, which means that I know a lot of stories that my younger cousins don't know. But I was not really aware of that until my grandmother died, because some of them only knew her as an Alzheimer old woman. I knew her as a active woman who was working at a public hospital. So we had a very different experience of her. And for some reason, I really thought that, magically they would know all of the histories, and they didn't. And so it was kind of disturbing, because I realized that, some of the histories might be lost. While I really thought that because there's a pretty big circulation of stories in the family, but it's from my perspective, it's because I ask a lot of things, and because people tell me a lot of things, and because I listen to them. And it's true that I had really this, how should I put it? I had this feeling that it was important to write it down, that it was important from a very personal perspective, but that it actually meant a lot of things for other people, that a number of other people would actually, that it would resonate with the histories of other persons. And actually the first message I got from someone who read the book was from this woman who's from Courmontéral, which is a small village near Montpellier. And her family has been from Courmontéral for like several generations. No migration, no exile, etc. in her family. But her mother was a maid in Courmontéral, and that meant that she wasn't allowed to enter certain houses. And for some reason, there is something in the book, probably what I tell about the relation to school that a number of people, including me, had, that just resonated, and she felt that she had to write to me. So I got this letter from this woman telling me about it, and I was like, so I guess the book is successful, because I had no idea how she got the book, but there was something of her experience that, that there was this sort of resonance. Also, I think that even though the world in which we are living is pretty different from the world in which I was born like 40 years ago, but I really have the feeling that for the great-grandparents, there were transformations that were very massive. That between the beginning of their lives as Spanish refugees in Algeria to nowadays when one of them has a Facebook account and does a number of things that were just not imaginable. I just have the feeling that the world has been changing so much and they've been going through so much that I don't want that to be lost. And it's also by listening to their stories, including those that do not seem related to race at all, that I realized it was actually in a lot of the experience of people, like all the time, that the colonial world was part of was part of it. During the presidential election, there was this sort of there was a very bad reactions on part of some people from some Pieds Noirs in the south of France after a declaration by Emmanuel Macron. And so one of his justifications was, I'm from a generation that came after colonization. So maybe this is it's lessons. I'm sorry if I offended you, but it's sensitive. And I was like, well, I think it's telling, because, and it's important that we try and keep a sort of a recollection of this time, not because it was great times, of course, but because it informs the kind of world in which we are living. And a number of people do it if it was, it wasn't the case, and it is the case. So it was, yeah. So yes.
So following on this, so in the book, I don't know what you want to say about the book. It's true that it's actually a book that is not easy to summarize, right? Because it's centered on different characters. So this 6 or 8 people. So about 25 people, right? The 25 names, and some of them are more obviously world focused than others. But you speak about their lives, their trajectories, and also you focus on one moment, right? The school for someone, the motherhood for another, or the move from Spain to Algeria for another. So you focus on one moment in the life of these people, then bring all of them together in this kind of saga of the family. And so one of the things that comes to mind when you read the book is how do you articulate this history? When we write history, most of the time it's linear, right? There's this happen, and then caused that, and then there is a series of factors that have caused that event to happen, and those were the repercussions, right? So the work of historians is historians of giving the connective tissue, right, between events and explaining in a linear way the traditional historians of what source. That's what we expect from historians, right? To put coherence where there seem to be disjunctures. And your book is very much about actually, sometimes you go back in time, you go back to a character that was born before as a character. So it's really sometimes you have the feeling of disjunctions or disjunctive histories. People are not the same place. So the first chapter is about the generations of your grandparents, and since a lot of them, appearing, and even sometimes the parents of your grandparents, right? So it's a collection of lives, right? So how do you think about that? How do you, when you were writing the book too? So I, as a reader, had to go back to the little genealogical tree at the beginning to who's Jeanette again, and Jacqueline, and Emma, and whose generation does she belong to, right? And so it's all fascinating. It's a fantastic reading. Really, it's both a very moving book and also analytically in terms of history, very interesting. But I was wondering about your choices of events in their lives that you thought were significant, and how you assembled all these worlds together to make a book.
It was very difficult, but it was hard because I had this page limit, which was 160 pages, which is nothing. I could have written a book on each one of these persons, and some people who read the book told me, we need more, so you have to write more on this person and this person. So it was very hard, and I struggled a lot with that. I decided to organize. At some point I thought that I would organize it with different topics, and then I said that I would do something more chronological, but it meant that I had to focus on 1 or 2 things per decade, 15 years, and that was not easy. I had to, I made choices by choosing what was more, I think, what was very significant for the purpose of the book, but it was very hard, and I had the impression that I was leaving out so much. So that was probably the most difficult part. I presented the book in a seminar run by a historian at my university, and one of them said, "Oh, it was just so difficult, with all of these characters, and you have to go back to the tree. You should have started with the present, and like just go back and like to change the order. And I thought about it during several days, thinking, oh, maybe I should have done that. You know, starting from current issues and like my two daughters and the reasons why I stopped them, and then just expand so it would have been the introduction of the various characters would have been more progressive. But then I thought it was powerful to start with the war as a common experience, and after a while I was like, no, I think it's not necessarily easy to read because there are so many characters, but starting with this was a good thing. Yeah, but it was clearly, I think that was a major issue I had in mind while writing.
Mm-hmm. And one of the choices you made was to concentrate on the direct ascendants of your daughters, right? So it's in each generation, for example. I'm sorry. So one of the choices that AUDREY made was to concentrate on the ascendants, the direct ascendants of her daughters. So meaning she speaks about herself and her companion, and then her parents, right, and her grandparents directly. But there are very few, except for very beautiful pages, I must say, about sisters. There's a very beautiful page about sisters, but no one was sisters should the page, the intensity of the sisterly relationship. But mostly brothers and sisters are not part of the book, right? So we know that your two grandmothers had each 7 children. We don't see that. We just see, the children that to you, right? And so there is something about that choice. So you told us in your presentation that you would tell us maybe a little more about how you define a family, right? But I was wondering about that. And why did you bring the sisters? And you also bring toward the end of the book 3 children, which you call enfant, child 1, child 2, child 3, which we understand are your siblings. No, they're not. So you see, I was actually confused. I was not sure about that. So, how does that look?
Well, when I started, I wanted to include family tree, and like the one in the book is not. It's really well done. Well, that's another story. But I discovered the whole galaxy of family trees online, and there are 2 ways to do family trees. You can do like this or like that. So it was another choice. And last week I presented it at NYU, and someone told me that's a very bourgeois way to present families, which is true. And especially with the fact that in this family there are a number of family composés, there are a number of my cousins are not my blood cousins. And they matter a lot in my life, but it's also something that I was thinking about. I think that there was a sort of like going through generation to generation. There was a page limit, and that was also another element, which was that my sister was really sick. I'm actually fine. Absolutely tired today. No, but it's actually something that this page of 2 sisters, it's actually groups of sisters. I mean, it's true that actually brothers have been reading the page and thought that, oh, it's actually true for brothers as well. But I thought that this relationship that I did not explore further in the book was maybe too hard to talk about when I wrote it. So that was probably, I thought about it a lot, but it was part of the equation. Now, enfant 1, enfant 2, enfant 3 is one of my favorite parts in the book. And it's actually my daughter, my nephew, and my niece. So, and I talk about like very contemporary children and their experience of racism in contemporary France. But my daughters are the 2 only characters whom I changed the names, so it's not exactly second names. So because they're the only ones I couldn't ask, the authorization to include them in the book. So it's, because the people who are not there anymore. But I really wanted to tell the stories of these kids, because by telling the stories of my older daughter, my nephew, who is now a 17-year-old black Muslim guy who's really tall in contemporary France, who likes wearing hoodies, which is a source of stress for his mother, my sister, for me. My niece, who is half Martinican, half Senegalese, young teenager from Toulouse, who has a Toulouse accent, but who always get asked, oh, but where are you from? And who now, there is something extraordinary in the fact that she loves the way she looks and she loves her hair and all of the things, but it's actually the result of an active work of 3 generations of women to do that. That this little girl does not experience of things that other people in the family have experienced. So, sisters, more than brothers, but some brothers are present in a more invisible way. But they are there. And it's fine, it's just like, really, it's something I can talk about my sister without crying these days. She's better. But I'm tired today.
Thank you. Actually, I had a different questions about affects. So, you speak a lot in the about racism, and we tend to think about racism as a structure, right? It's a structure of French society. It's something that is inspired in institutions, in school, housing, in police work, in and it's also something that is a lived experience, and they have beautiful pages. I'm going just to quote you, also to give to get across the idea that this book is extremely literary, so you are littéraire contrarié, but not that contrarié actually. You're right, it's absolutely beautifully written. So page 145, going to read. Unless you want to read? Don't you read? Okay, so read part of 145. It's a little long, I'm not sure.
It's interesting because often people ask me to read that one page. So it's called Aspect du quotidien des années 1930 à nos jours. Il y a ton bamboula qui attend, négresse à plateau, tu es noir partout. Tu te calmes, le monsieur va te manger. Pas toi, hein, les autres. Elle est frisée comme un mouton, Célestine aussi. Ta peau est noire parce que tu te laves avec du savon noir. Vous êtes noir comme du caca. Elle a le rythme dans la peau. Non, mais les Antillais, vous avez un peu un poil dans la main. Non, je vous ai demandé votre nom, pas le prénom. Vous êtes la nounou? Par contre, pour le stage, là, va falloir changer de coiffure. Hein. Si ça se trouve, elle ne sera pas trop foncée, ta fille. Je suis blanche, mais on m'a toujours dit que j'avais un cul de négresse. 4 ans, mon fils, mais il les aime déjà bien typés, les filles. Hein. Vous pouvez prouver que vous êtes la mère? Vous à Maï? Are you the mommy or the nanny? Vos papiers. C'est fou, les Antillaises, elles sont toujours à poil. Tu as l'âme très noire. Faut arrêter de se victimiser. Hein. Pourquoi tu dis que tu es noir, tu es marron? Ça, c'est une métisse, ça, non? C'est votre compagnon, le propriétaire de l'appartement, j'imagine? Elle a de beaux cheveux, votre fille. Vous êtes fille de diplomate? Toi, t'aimes les blancs, ça se voit. Dégage, ça noir. Vous, les Antillaises, vous êtes quand même très susceptibles. On a beau être prévenu, ça fait parfois l'effet d'un coup de poing dans le ventre. Et donc,
yeah, so actually you mentioned so the coup de poing dans le ventre comes like you repeat this mention several times and in all the last pages of the book, and so I wanted to ask you about, about this rather structure
Mhm.
and the coup de poing,
Yeah, it's
the punch in the stomach.
not everyone in France is convinced that racism is about structure. People I exchange with and work with are pretty convinced of that, but not a lot of people. So it's true that it's important to talk about this element, about its systemic and structural dimension. But I really thought that for a number of people to understand another thing, it was important to talk about all of these moments, the experience of racism within your own family, the experience of racism. When people tell you dégage sa voix, it's pretty clear. And it's not different, there aren't a lot of people who tell you that that wasn't racism. But when they tell you, oh, quelle est mignonne ta fille, j'adore les petits métis, as if it was little puppies. This sort of negrophilia that exists very much in France. I think it's very important and powerful to make people understand that this experience of racism is part of what some people will call microaggression, but it's actually pretty macro in the way you live and in the way you construct your own self. And it was important for me to talk about that. All of these are things that have been heard by people in the family, in this different family. It's all like part of them by me, but by my daughter. 4 ans, ils les aiment déjà bien. It was a 4-year-old birthday party. And so it was important for me to talk about that. It was also, I talk sometimes, including in this, of intra-family racism, because for me it matters. For one thing, a number of my very close colleagues and friends are people who I have like very regular discussions on the evolution of anti-racism in France and about the rise of Afrofeminism, of a number of organizations that exist. And it's also people I feel I'm very comfortable to discuss about my discomfort with some aspects of these movements, but it's just discomfort, that means that you can talk about it, that means that you can debate. And one of them was when there were all of these debates on non-mixity in the French context. I was happy to have colleagues to whom I could talk about the fact that I thought that it was not necessarily strategically a good thing, but that I was also totally, it was very hard to see the reactions to that, to this, the way some women would try to organize, and how having a gathering among black women is transformed the French media in it's forbidden to white people, which is not the same. But also, I've always felt, and that's because of my mom's experience, that, when there was the Communauté des Coloniales in France, that was a few years ago, that was open to people who personally experienced le racisme d'État, that's how it was coined, that actually a population that really needs, and the goal of the Communauté of this decolonial summer camp was to educate people to anti-racism. And I talk about the fact that even if I have this discomfort, I've also been seeking sometimes some sort of safe spaces in which, with people who share the experience of racism, but also the experience of growing up in a family that didn't have any money. But that, to me, a population that really needs to be educated to anti-racism is the population of white parents of kids who are not considered white. Single moms who are white, who have like kids that are identified as black, and that's actually pretty common in France. And I'm like, those people are people that really need to get an education to anti-racism, that they really need to, and might seem like nothing compared to racial discriminations or the impossibility to get access to school or to proper education or to housing or to jobs. But being a child and hearing every day from your mom that your hair is difficult is actually also, it's important. Having like the racist uncle that you have to deal with when you're not white. It's not just, oh, you don't have the same opinion. It's like when you have like your little kid who's being exoticized, etc., etc. I think I wanted to talk to the people who experience that as well, and that's also why I tried to take this intimate moments, to show that I acknowledge that racism also starts in sort of friends relations, in family relations with your mother, your grandmother, with an uncle, because that's a situation in France where you have like so many mixed couples. Well, we don't know exactly how many, but we know from experience that there are many of them, and that very often people encounter racism within the family, and I wanted to try and talk about all of these dimensions of racism in this tiny book. So you see, I wanted to put a lot of things in this small book.
One last question before I open it to the audience. I had a question about your voice. So I was very interested in the fact that you said that in your dissertation, you didn't feel like you should put yourself, right? That's what you learn when you write a dissertation. It's not about you. You have to have an analytical gaze. And then you added this kind of post-pass epilogue that brought into the book. And I was wondering about how you put yourself in the book. So you speak about your school experience, your experience in school, going to Johns Hopkins, and so you describe yourself as an object of historical analysis almost, right? So in the same way, you give yourself the same place that you give to some of your grandparents or the grandparents of your companion, and so on and so forth. And then there are moments when you actually switch to italics, and with italics, we have the impression that now you speak, that this is you, this is your opinion. I was just wondering about the politics of italics. And how did you say that there were moments that you had to, in a way, write that in the book in order to let yourself speak? There's a wonderful passage about Rachel Dolezal. So this woman, this white woman, passed as black, right? And you describe a scene on TV, so you watch her on TV speaking, and kind of a very animated interaction with a woman, with a black woman. How could you do that? Right? You have no idea. You have no idea. How do you dare? Right? And so, and you don't. So you put yourself in the italics. You don't really tell us exactly what you think, right? But we know because we know that you identify with the interlocutor of Rachel, the way it's being presented. I find this absolutely wonderful. But I just wanted to let us know a little more about when you felt like it was okay to take your place.
Yeah, I think it's very often when there was a lot of emotion in what I was going to write, because there was something. It's a book that I did not write for my colleagues and for, it's not an academic book. I kind of knew that colleagues would read the book, but it wasn't really the target audience. But I really wanted to add that many footnotes are like maybe 15 or 20. But I wanted the book to be very precise when it deals with history. But also, I wanted to use this sort of ressort littéraire, which is emotions. And because I felt that it's sometimes how you make people understand, and for this, and so the politics of Italy was at first sort of, it wasn't totally clear. It was like a sort of a politics that was kind of created in a very incremental way. It was not totally coherent at first, but it was to talk about moments when I give a little bit more of myself, in which I don't necessarily have proofs or total justifications or historical, hard proofs, but I still try to convey something. And so I use the italics for that, and I sometimes make suppositions, say, oh, maybe that's for that, or it's probably for that reason or that reason. But it was really the reason why I wanted to take that. It's like I want to make a point. I'm not sure I have all of the historical or analytical elements to do so, but I still want to make it. So I'm using the italics so I can make it. And yeah, so that's when I would use it's actually very often the moments in italics are the ones that I wrote, just in one, how do you say, danger, just in one. It was less difficult to write. Yeah, it was just like, and very often because the publishing house would tell me, we need to read something, something. And one of the first texts I wrote, there's one part on crack. A member of the family has been struggling with crack addiction, and because that's actually the reason why I wanted to do social science when I was younger, was that I was sick of all these people talking about identity in Martinique, because there was this sort of a crisis of people dying of crack in Martinique. And that was a very big issue, and like 20 years after, I'm like writing books on identity as well. And so that's one of the first things I wrote after being pressured by the publishing house, and I sent them the text, here, the text. They called me like, oh, what was stuff? It's just like, but it's, this moment actually, when I think that I'm not even sure that it's in Italian, but it could have been. But it's this moment when it's, yeah, I want to make a point, but it's just me. And just like for Rachel Dolezal, there could be counter arguments, and I'm aware of all of the counter arguments to the moment when I tell her, but there's a childhood, Rachel, and you've never been a little black girl, so. And you have this such an essential vision of what it is to be a black person that no black person has. So you essentially feel that you've always been black, but that's not the case for a number of people. And so this sort of very essential, and it's something that we could have an endless debate on the case, and it's also because I would try to explain to friends the rage by some of my African American friends with this case, who are like very upset, very angry. I was not that upset because my experience of racialization and race is not a US one, even if I know that one experience. But I would try to explain to my good friends who are white in France, because I'm like, okay, get it, but it's so. And I couldn't. And I was like, well, maybe this text will convince them. My arguments count.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you
I kept the floor a little too longer, but it's fascinating book, so we have some time for questions.
She wanted to ask me.
Oh, you had a question? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Next question.
Thank you so much. I cannot wait to read the book. I have two questions, one really quick. The first is, what did you understand textuel to watch from you when they asked you for a French version of Between the World and Me? And then my second question, I work primarily on Haitian literature and culture, so I was very struck by your rather sort of almost utopian presentation of life in Martinique as being a space where you can escape in some ways the traps, the macro and microaggressions of racism that one may encounter as a boumilon or as a négobritain or whatever else. But I was curious to understand that in that context, can you talk about race, racialization, and colorism in context of the different communities?
No, it's a great point. And actually in the book I have a whole part on the fact that I don't have a romantic vision of Martinique, because I'm really well aware of racial hierarchies in the context of Martinique, and how I went from, this black nobody in the context of Martinique to, I was a very good student. So when I took Latin in quatrième, it became a little, and I went to the classroom of people who were slightly lighter, and then it went well, and then my cousins who came after me went directly to the right classes because I had been there before, and so I'm really aware of that, and at the same time, I talk about a very specific experience that I had growing up in Martinique, which is that I arrived there when I was 4, and there was a place called Le Cermac, which is the result of the public policy, the cultural public policy of Aimé Césaire, which is basically a cultural center. It wasn't a cultural center that had the kind of the ambition of being the heart of the Black Atlantic in Fort-de-France, where during 10 years I took like acting classes, and you could do music and a lot of things without, you paid 15 francs at the time. That was nothing. It was in the middle of Fort-de-France with professors from the whole Black Atlantic, and it was clearly a place where, I like to think that it was a place where people wanted his children to have des armes miraculeuses to fight, could find them. And I realized that my experience was really much informed by the fact that I spent so much time there with people from several social backgrounds, because it was primarily for the kids from Fort-de-France who didn't have money. And I was going there with a highly politicized mother, was mixed, was permanently in search of her identity, and who has a very different experience of Martinique because she got there when she was 30, not speaking Creole, and she realized that it was probably good for her daughters, but very difficult for her. So I tried to also show this the kind of setting that Martinique is. So it's really not. I don't have this romantic vision. I'm really well aware of, and I try to show it in the book of the problematic dimension. But I had the chance. I was lucky enough to be there at a time when I would, read Aimé Césaire when I was little, and I'd play La Tragédie du Roi Christophe, and I would do a lot of things that are just kind of unique and that do not exist anymore in Martinique, because that lasted like 20 years, and in the mid-90s it was almost over. So I don't know if it's kind of answering the question. And another thing, as for textual, seriously, I don't know. I think it was when Coates was in Paris. His book was very successful, but it's true that when he did his first presentation at La Maison de la Poésie, I really wanted to go. I wanted to ask questions about a number of things, and I didn't have a babysitter, so I took my oldest daughter with me, and she was not really happy about that. It was a Wednesday night, and so I went, and the crowd there was like very bourgeois Paris, drinking champagne, and not getting it. And I was so upset. And I was listening to the thing, and I was like, if there's not going to be a Q&A, and I'm like, and that was kind of the Paris reception of Between the World and Me. It was just like the New York author that was in Paris, etc. Except that the journalist that was interviewing him asked him the wrong question. Un journaliste de France Culture, I don't remember the name, and he said, "Oh, so you talk a lot about..." Yeah, because I wanted to ask him about this title, Colère Noire. I was like, you have this beautiful title in English, Between the World and Me. You're talking about this bridge between the world and you, and then in Colère Noire, because in French you have to, make jokes, you have to make jeux de mots. And I was so upset with the title. And with the Avant-propos by Alain Mabancou, that is, I think it's a scandal. I mean, he writes that black people in France can't identify with slavery, and I'm like, really? I mean, that it's not part of their, well. So I wanted to ask questions about that, and they say that they are not doing Q&As, and clearly the people there don't care about what It's in the book. But then the journalist asked, he asked, well, so you talk a lot about fear, more than anger actually. You talk a lot about fear. The fear you have for your son and of a black man living in the body, a man living in a black body in the US context. But can't you understand that white people can also be scared? Well, I let you imagine the kind of response he got. And it was, and all of a sudden the whole room was like, because all of them were kind of getting into the real stuff, like the discussion, the very difficult discussion. It wasn't just, the Paris intelligentsia receiving codes and talking about this wonderful book about this terrible country where the police kill black people. All of a sudden it was more, oh, okay, so you don't understand, and no, and like, it was great. And so it kind of reconciled me with that. But it told me something important about the reception of the book. And I had the chance to listen to him in Martinique 1 year and a half, last year. He was invited by the City of Fort-de-France, who is trying to reconnect with this sort of public policy I was telling you about. So he was invited, and he gave this conference in this context in which people just get it. And I actually wrote I wrote a text on this sort of public sphere that is in Martinique, which is also French, because we get the French media, there's a French administration, people speak French, there's the French educational system, but it's also a sphere in which you can talk about a number of issues without anyone actually telling you it's communautarist, without having anyone asking you to justify that it's actually legitimate to talk about that. And I was like, well, Martinique is a very interesting place in the sense that it's very much French, but a kind of France in which you can, in certain circles, talk about this. And he was talking in front of 2,000 persons. Everybody was surprised that 2,000 persons would come and listen to him and ask questions and be moved, and like that there would be teenagers. And I thought, well, that's the kind of French experience I wanted you to have, not just like a Maison de la Poésie in Paris.
I'm curious about the role of language in your process of putting this together. Did languages that weren't French, like Creole or Arabic or Spanish, have a role in your process?
So the book is mainly in French, but there is some Creole in the book. So as I was telling you, I grew up in Martinique, but with a mom who arrived at 30 years old. So in a family in which it would not have been a problem to speak Creole, but just my mom didn't speak it. And so I have this weird relationship to Creole, which is that I understand everything. I fell in love on like some beautiful Zouk songs, and I sing in Creole, etc. But I was not fluent until recently when I decided to take Creole lessons, because I was like, my English can be better than my Creole. It's not possible. Even if most people, French is, so present in Martinique, but I wanted to put Creole in it because my relationship to Creole has been changing. So there's some Creole, and there's a lot of things on language. One thing that I like in the family stories is when you hear all of the debates today on Frenchness, what it is to be French, and who is a legitimate French person. Julien, our partner, often talks about his great-grandmother, who was a refugee from Spain to Algeria, then came from Algeria to France after a few years after the independence of Algeria, and who never spoke French, and who became French like that. And that he never, until recently, connected being French with speaking French, because his grandmother had. And I talk a little bit about now, like this issue of proficiency in French, and for most people, it's normal, if you're French, you have to speak French. Well, there are these experiences in French history of like French people not speaking French, and people not necessarily questioning the fact that they would have a French citizenship, or not so much in the media, etc., etc.
I don't know. Yes, one question here. We're going to take two quick questions, and maybe two quick answers.
Yeah.
Because I'm on the side of. So yes, go ahead.
That was a very interesting presentation. Thank you so much for doing it. I was kind of a bit caught up with the your mother saying your grandmother couldn't be lying about going to Denmark. I do try to explore. I even try to explore more the story in terms of whether it was true or not, because usually I tell my patients now, and when you are trying to do history, anthropology, and art, especially when you're doing people of African, or what I call African descent, or Black people, you'll be surprised how many stories were changed, how many stories were erased, how many stories were made into the academic article, or become considered, academic viable sources, hard sources and resources. So it is possible that not all parts of Denmark was actually occupied. There were 7 underground, we have underground passage here that occurred. So I think that's going to be really very interesting story. And also, are you going to send the book? Are you going to delve into movies or other stories?
So about Denmark. So I asked several persons, I did some research, and that was something I say in the book. The one person from the Musée Portuaire de Dunkirk, which is a great place you have to go if you go to Dunkirk, told me, well, most French kids from Dunkirk went to this and that region, but I know of some people going to Switzerland and maybe third countries, so that's not totally impossible, and for me that was good enough, because it was so important for my mother, because I had imagined lots of things, about, maybe my grandmother invented this for a number of reasons. So for me, I think she went to the park. I think she went. Yeah, I would love to do something where I would like to have it translated, and I would love to do other stuff with it, but I don't really know what. Let's see. Thank you for your question and what you were saying about stories and things that are erased, etc.
One last question.
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much. And my question was really, is this going to be translated in English as someone who doesn't read French? And I would love to get to the story.
Well, thank you very much. I just got an answer maybe, the book is excellent, but more for a French audience, etc. So that's one of my goals. I really want to have it translated in English because it's also a very personal reason, but I have a lot of friends, I have lots of friends and I want them to read the book. I want them to read it, and I think that it's a good French Martinican perspective on a number of questions that are very important here too. And I think that it would add to discussion, to the conversation. So I've just turned it to one publishing house, so I'm going to do it more systematically, and yeah, I would like to translate it. Thank you. Thank you so much for